and go into the first topic, which is probably the biggest topic in all of basketball right now, is DeMar DeRozan being traded, sign and trade with the Sacramento Kings. Now, I said before on the previous podcast on Friday that it was suspected that he might go to a team in California, either the Lakers or the Clippers, whichever one best suited him, or even, at one point I thought it was going to be the Golden State Warriors, just because, trying to replace Klay Thompson isn't really the easiest thing to do, but that wasn't what happened. And I'm not even going to lie to you guys, I completely forgot about the Sacramento Kings, and I really didn't think they were going to make a move to try to get DeMar DeRozan, but they ended up getting him anyway. And the sign and trade, let me just go ahead and find it. It's actually a 3-team trade a 3-team sign and trade that the Kings ended up agreeing to in order to deal with DeMar DeRozan. So, for one, the Kings received DeMar DeRozan. That's the only thing they got out of this trade. The San Antonio Spurs, they were also involved in this trade, and they ended up getting Harrison Barnes as well as a 2031 first-round pick swap. And then the Chicago Bulls, in return for trading away DeMar, ended up receiving Chris Duarte and 2 second-round picks. Now, I honestly feel like the loser of all of these teams in this trade is the Sacramento Kings. Because obviously, in order to avoid the second apron, a lot of teams have been doing a bunch of sign and trades so that way they don't put their team in a worse situation than what they already would be in. So really, I feel like the winner of this trade is Harrison Barnes and the 2031 first round pick swap, because Harrison Barnes, of all of those players, I feel would bring, and in the situation that the Spurs are in right now, I feel like that would bring the Spurs a lot more value than Chris Duarte would bring to the Bulls, and then DeMar would bring to the Sacramento Kings. So that's my opinion on the trade overall. I'll just go ahead and run down a little bit of details on how the DeMar DeRozan's contract is constructed with the Sacramento Kings. So, as I said earlier, it was via sign and trade, and he signed 3-year, $70+ million agreement. And I feel like, for somebody like DeMar, that's a little bit less than what I would value him. I don't really see DeMar DeRozan as a $70 million player, especially when you take into account some of the other contracts that were signed in free agency, for example, Franz Wagner making almost, let me just see this absurd contract because it's absolutely ridiculous, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the fourth segment. He signed 5-year, $224 million. Now, tell me, is Franz Wagner better than DeMar DeRozan? Me personally, I don't think so. Despite the fact that DeMar is one of the sort of older players in the NBA and one of the veteran players, I don't really think that that's really a contract that Franz Wagner deserves as opposed to DeMar. Granted, I don't think DeMar is worth that much money either, but if you're going to pay Franz Wagner all of that cash, then you should at least, pay DeMar a lot more cash than that. But obviously, given the second apron and the new CBA rules, it's really difficult to negotiate a huge contract worth that much. But, that's somewhat of a steal, the fact that they were able to get DeMar at such a low price. But obviously they would have to, they had to give up several other pieces in order to acquire DeMar. So, not really feeling all too well on that trade. And the mesh between, the Kings and DeMar DeRozan is a little bit off. The best players on the Kings are De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis. And while they are very good, and while I do think that they are some snubs in the All-Star, and as well as, All-NBA selections, they are not really known as being three-point shooting threats. And now they just added another player that's also known for not being a three-point shooting threat. So I'm having difficulty trying to see how this would mesh with their system, because we know that De'Aaron Fox is a great dunker, phenomenal dunker. Same thing with DeMar DeRozan, and DeMar DeRozan is a phenomenal mid-range scorer. And the same applies with Sabonis being a phenomenal mid-range scorer. And I feel like, scoring for twos in a league that prioritizing scoring threes, let alone, some inefficient two-point shots, because DeMar DeRozan does take a lot of mid-ranges, same with Sabonis, I don't think that's going to really win them that many games. However, DeMar is a pretty, he's a good defender. He's not a great defender. He's not a bad defender either. And he's slightly above decent just because of his height and his frame. So I'd say he's a rather, a good defender at the small forward position. But at the same time, you would much rather prioritize a three-point shooter when you have a playmaker like Sabonis and you have someone who attracts that much attention in the paint as De'Aaron Fox when he's, playing downhill and trying to drive towards the basket. So on the other hand, like with the Bulls, obviously they are trying to rebuild the team, and they've had trouble trying to trade Zach LaVine for like the longest time, and they were able to surprisingly negotiate a trade to send DeMar DeRozan away. Now let's see if Zach LaVine is going to follow suit and they, commit to this full rebuild of the squad. So we already knew that DeMar wasn't going to return to the Bulls, but the real question was where he was going to go in free agency. And a lot of people speculated the Lakers, especially after Kendrick Lamar made that music video where they had, obviously DeMar made a cameo in that music video. I alluded to that in the previous podcast. But this is just another player that the Lakers miss out on in free agency. And there aren't really that many competent free agents left for the Lakers to really make a deal with, making it even more difficult to acquire talent on the squad. Now, according to this article, the fit of DeMar in Sacramento is going to take some work, as I said before. De'Aaron Fox is already in place as primary ball handler. Malik Monk is also a high-usage scorer when he does play. And while Kevin Huerter doesn't need the ball to be effective, he is an offense-first player as a shooter. So sharing the ball amongst all of those players is going to take some time getting used to as well, for DeMar being the 1 or the 2 option on the Chicago Bulls, whichever one you want to call it. He could be either the 1 or the 2 option. It's really down to just opinions. And honestly, really, it could be down to the type of night that he's having as well. So defensively, the Kings have Keon Ellis as on the perimeter and not much else. So bringing DeMar, while it doesn't really improve their perimeter defense, it only really improves their scoring. And on top of that, DeMar not being a very competent three-point shooter doesn't help matters at all. Now, it's unclear how much he'll be able to help Sacramento on offense when he doesn't have the ball, because DeMar is a shot creator. He is one of those players that creates difficult shots and creates space in the mid-range. So you sort of have to give him the ball on certain possessions. And how that's going to mesh with the Kings and the offense they already have set, not entirely sure. But his late game shot making is obviously quite valuable and something that the Kings are definitely going to be utilizing. He was in the nominee for one of the most clutch players in the NBA while he was on the Chicago Bulls, and he's made some crazy difficult shots and crazy clutch shots for the Chicago Bulls. I remember he hit that one-legged three-point shot when the shot clock was expiring to beat the buzzer and ultimately win the game for the Chicago Bulls. That was a crazy shot. Like, if there was any type of player that resembled Kobe, it would be this. I pointed in the wrong direction. It would be this man right here, because his game is slightly similar to Kobe, and it makes sense because, he grew up in the Bay Area and he grew up watching Kobe Bryant play basketball, and his game, since it is so heavy on the mid-range and him being a shooting guard, makes sense how he prioritizes taking those really difficult shots. And That's obviously where I think his value is going to come in, because not only is he clutch, but De'Aaron Fox is also rather clutch, and he was also in the nominee as being one of the more clutch players in the NBA at one point. Now, the Kings, they wanted a major talent upgrade to sort of push this team to the next level. So is DeMar going to be the type of player for the Kings? Not entirely sure, but we have to see how the rest of the season unfolds. And with that, that is going to be the end of the first segment. So now we will go ahead and go into the second segment, where I talk about LeBron James and his recent contract with the Lakers. I feel like I've talked about LeBron's contract for like 3 straight podcasts right now, but now it's like finalized, and the Lakers are just below the second apron, which helps LA in the future. So I will be talking a little bit about that contract and what it means right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind.